They thought I was being petty when I handed in my resignation. They thought the documentation I left behind was a parting gift. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew that without me, the whole system would crumble. And I was right. I stood in Derek's office on Monday, March 4th, 2024. 7,058 in the morning, 2 minutes early, the same way I'd started every workday for 5 years. The glass wall behind him looked out over the open-plan floor, where a handful of early birds were already hunched over their monitors. Nobody at the ping-pong table. Nobody ever at the ping-pong table. I placed the folder on his desk. It was thick. Nearly 200 pages of documentation, printed and bound like something you'd see at a corporate audit. I'd spent every spare moment of my 2-week notice writing it. Derek looked at the folder, then at me, and leaned back in his chair with that smile he always wore when he thought he'd won something. "Maya," he said, drawing my name out like we were old friends. "I really appreciate this. Most people in your position would just walk out. Leave us to sort through the rubble." I kept my face still. I wanted to make sure the transition was smooth. That's exactly the kind of team player attitude I've always admired in you. It took everything I had not to laugh. Him telling me I was a team player. Him, who had presented my architecture proposals in quarterly reviews like they were his own sketches from late nights. Him, who had leaned on me for every hard deadline, every emergency fix, every 2 a.m. deployment. He'd spent years polishing his image with my work, and the one time it counted, he'd made sure I stayed exactly where I was. "It's all there," I said, patting the folder. Every function, every edge case, every decision explained in excruciating detail. Derek didn't open it. He didn't even glance at the title page. He just slid the folder to the corner of his desk and folded his hands. "I trust you, Maya. That's always been your strength. The thoroughness." I smiled at that. Of course he trusted me. He'd never once read my code. He didn't need to. He'd always had me there to run behind him and fix whatever he'd broken. And soon he wouldn't have that anymore. Genuine care in my voice, I said. The new hires should be able to pick it up without any trouble. I made sure the naming conventions were clear. Obscure, standard stuff. Obscure was the operative word. I'd spent 5 years building that customer management system. I knew every line of it the way you know the layout of your own kitchen in the dark. So when I wrote that documentation, I used variables like SCMTHREHREF and Bootstrap 4.2 and Quantum Handlev 3, names that looked legitimate but meant nothing to anyone who hadn't built the system themselves. I omitted key context. I left out the config files that lived in my local environment. I documented the system as it should have worked, not as it actually did. And I described it all with such clean, professional confidence that no one would ever suspect a thing. A professional parting gift. Perfect on the surface. Absolutely useless underneath. If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to Revenger. I watched Derek stand up and extend his hand. I took it. His grip was warm and firm, the handshake of a man who had just gotten everything he wanted. "If you ever need a reference," he said, "you know I'll sing your praises." Thank you, Derek. If things get slow on the job market, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll reach out, I thought, but not the way you think. I let go of his hand and turned toward the door. My laptop bag was slung over my shoulder. Inside it, tucked in a zippered pocket I'd used for exactly one thing over the last 3 weeks, was the real documentation. The true documentation. Every architecture decision I'd made, every workaround I'd built, every fragile dependency laid out in crisp, readable detail. On a USB drive. All mine. I'd started collecting copies of my code long before I knew I'd need them. Version history, email trails, chat logs, screenshots. The USB was crammed with proof of every hour I'd poured into that company. Derek had no idea it existed. As I walked out, I heard him say to his assistant, "See? She finally realized her place." I smiled. He had no idea what I'd just handed him. I walked to my car that morning with Derek's voice still ringing in my ears. "See? She finally realized her place." I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before turning the key, and that's when I let myself think about how we got here. All 5 years of it. Because Derek didn't start out as the villain. He started out as my manager, the guy who'd clap me on the shoulder after a demo and say, "Great teamwork today." And I was young enough, hungry enough to believe that teamwork meant credit shared. It took me 3 years to understand the math. The first time I noticed was in a quarterly review meeting in 2021. I'd spent 6 weeks designing a new billing module. 6 weeks of late nights, of takeout containers piling up on my desk, of my cat sitting on my keyboard while I worked. I presented it to the room. Derek nodded along. Then he said, "This aligns perfectly with the vision I've been pushing." And the VP smiled at him. Not at me. I let it slide. I told myself it was office politics, that visibility mattered, that my work would speak for itself eventually. That was the lie I told myself for years. There were more instances. The caching optimization I built that cut load times by 40%. Derek presented it as an idea I've been noodling on. The API redesign that saved the company $150,000 a year in server costs. Derek's summary slide had his name on it. Mine was in the acknowledgments. Buried. But the moment that broke me came on Friday, February 23rd, 2024. A week before I resigned, Sarah sent me a screenshot at 9:47 in the morning. I remember the timestamp because I stared at it for so long. It was an email chain. Derek to Linda Martinez in HR. Subject line, VP of Engineering Candidate Evaluations. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Derek had written, "Maya is a strong individual contributor, but she's not a team player. She lacks strategic vision. I don't think she's ready for leadership." Not a team player. I'd built the entire customer management system from nothing. I'd trained 4 junior developers, including Sarah. I'd covered for Derek's technical gaps more times than I could count. And that was his assessment? I didn't confront him. Confrontation was his game, not mine. Instead, I did what I do best. I documented. That Saturday, February 24th, I cleared my kitchen table. I opened my laptop and started a new folder, SAW. I called it Reference Personal. I went through 5 years of email archives. Every message where I'd explained a design decision. Every thread where Derek forwarded my ideas to leadership without copying me. Every report where my analysis appeared with his signature. I pulled the chat logs, 243 conversations where I'd walked him through problems he didn't understand, where I'd patiently explained the code base he was supposed to manage, PAR, and then I went into the code, the version history, commit after commit with my name on it. And that's when I found something I hadn't expected. Derek had been deleting my comments from the codebase, removing my explanatory notes, my name tags on major functions. He was erasing my fingerprints, scrubbing the proof of who really built that system. I checked the dates. He'd started a year ago. Small deletions at first, then more aggressive ones as the VP position started to look real. I sat back in my chair and looked at what I'd gathered. Emails, logs, Git histories, timestamps. a complete map of my contribution to BrightPath Solutions. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing. Derek had made a very big mistake. He'd assumed I'd take the unfairness quietly. He'd assumed my loyalty meant silence. He'd looked at 5 years of my work and decided I was just a cog he could replace. Maybe I was, but I was a cog with a paper trail. That night, I drafted my resignation letter. I didn't send it yet. I had 1 more week to prepare. To build my trap, I saved every email, every chat log, every version of my code. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing. Derek had made a very big mistake. The resignation letter went out on Monday, March 4th. I gave 2 weeks' notice. Standard, clean, professional. Derek called me into his office at 7:58 in the morning, 2 minutes before our scheduled meeting. Classic Derek, always needing to be early, always needing to control the room. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head. The glass wall behind him showed the whole open-plan floor. The ping-pong table nobody ever touched sat directly in his eye line. "Maya," he said, like we were old friends. "Hate to see you go. You've been a real asset." I nodded. "Thank you, Derek." "Of course, we'll need you to document everything before you leave. Full handover. Make it easy for the next person." "Absolutely," I said. "I'll have it ready before my last day." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "That's why you're a professional." I knew you'd understand. I understood more than he knew. For the next 2 weeks, I sat at my desk with my headphones on and wrote documentation. The most thorough-looking documentation anyone had ever seen. 200 pages of careful notes, architecture diagrams, API references, edge cases. Page after page, every function explained, every dependency mapped, every decision documented, and none of it would help them. I used obscure naming conventions. Variables called things like Q6 junction instead of something human. I described files by their technical location but never explained how they connected to the actual business logic. I wrote paragraphs that looked complete but were missing the one sentence that made everything click. On every page, I was careful, precise, professional, and completely, utterly useless. The perfect trap is one that looks like a gift. At the end of week 1, Sarah stopped by my desk. She leaned in close, her voice low. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm great," I said. "Never better." She glanced at the stack of printed pages. "That's a lot of documentation." "It's a lot of anything if you say it with confidence," I said. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You know what you're doing." It wasn't a question. By Thursday of my second week, I had the handover folder assembled. Nearly 200 pages, color-coded tabs, an executive summary at the front that explained everything in language that sounded perfect and meant nothing. I printed the final version and slid it into a presentation folder with the BrightPath logo on the front, the kind you get at corporate events. Expensive looking. Then I copied the real documentation onto a USB drive. The true documentation. The one that mapped every variable, every function, every business rule in language a new hire could actually use. I added my evidence too, the emails, the chat logs, the deleted code comments with the dates I'd pulled them from the Git history. I put the USB drive in the zippered pocket of my laptop bag. Close, secure, mine. Friday, March 15th. My last day. I walked into Derek's office at 11 in the morning. He was on the phone. He held up one finger asking me to wait. I waited. He talked for another 2 minutes. Finally, he hung up. "There she is," he said. Last day. Last day, I said. I set the folder on his desk. 200 pages. It made a satisfying sound. What's this? He asked. The handover documentation. Everything you need to keep the system running. He flipped open the cover, glanced at the first page. His eyes barely lingered on it. I trust you, Maya, he said, and closed the folder. You've always been thorough. 3 weeks of my life went into that folder, I said. Which was true. I'd spent 3 weeks preparing. 2 weeks writing the fake. 1 week building the real one. Well, we appreciate it. He stood up and extended his hand. Wish you all the best out there. I shook it. His grip was firm, confident, happy. You too, Derek, I said. I'm sure you'll handle everything just fine. As I walked out for the last time, I saw him high-fiving his new team on the floor. They were celebrating, laughing, congratulating each other on a smooth transition. Sarah caught my eye from across the room. She gave me a small nod. I nodded back. And I thought about the USB drive in my laptop bag, and the real documentation, and every email, every timestamp, every line of code with my name scrubbed off it. I just hoped they'd enjoy the next few weeks. 3 weeks after I left, the world went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the kind where you know something is happening somewhere and you're just waiting for the phone to ring. I was at home, working on a small consulting gig for a local real estate firm. Nothing fancy, just a database optimization that was taking me longer than it should have. The silence felt heavy, then my phone buzzed, and Sarah's name lit up the screen. Hey, I said, everything okay? Define? Okay, she said. I leaned back in my chair. That bad? She let out a breath that told me everything. The system started failing on Monday, April 8th. I don't know what happened. 1 minute it was fine. The next, clients couldn't log in. Data was coming back corrupted. A few of them started calling. First it was 1, then 5. Then the phone wouldn't stop ringing. I looked at my calendar. April 8th. That was exactly 3 weeks after my last day. March 15th. I'd been gone for 3 weeks and a day. What about the documentation? I asked. Sarah laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Maya, they can't read it. Who's they? The new hires. Derek hired 2 senior engineers in the first week after you left. They started going through the folder you handed over. You know that folder, tabbed, color-coded, full of what looked like every decision you ever made in 5 years. What happened? They couldn't make sense of any of it. She paused. One of them asked me if you were being serious or if you were playing a joke on them. I kept my voice calm. What makes you say that? Maya, your documentation uses variable names that don't match anything in the codebase. Like half the functions in there reference names that don't exist in the repo. The logic, trees jump in ways that aren't connected. It's like you were writing a book in a language nobody else speaks. I knew exactly what she was describing. The subtle omissions, the skipped contexts, the names I swapped out that only existed in my head. I wrote that documentation to look perfect and be completely useless. Derek tried to fix one of the bugs himself, Sarah said. Derek doesn't debug. Tell that to the server farm. He saw a critical error flag this morning. So he went into the production environment, ran a hot fix on a bug he didn't understand. It crashed the entire client database. We got locked out of everything for 2 hours. 12 clients sent cancellation threats. I closed my eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt that quiet hum of confirmation that I'd been right all along. Where is Derek now? I asked. hiding in his office. The CEO is his office right now. Robert walked past my desk about 20 minutes ago with a face like a storm warning. Derek is in there talking about how it's a transitional instability, but everyone can see he's in over his head. Does he still have the folder? Data says it's still on his desk, untouched for 2 weeks before today. He finally flipped through it this morning after the first crash. He got about 3 pages in and put it down. That was the documentation I handed him on March 15th. The day I walked out, the day he high-fived his team and celebrated a smooth transition. The day he said he trusted me. Robert is losing his mind, Sarah whispered. Maya, they're going to call you. What should I tell them? I looked at my laptop, the one with the USB drive tucked into the zippered pocket. The real documentation, every variable name unlocked, every decision explained, every timestamp from my Git history still intact. 5 years of my work in one small piece of plastic. Tell them I'm busy, I said, but I'll be available for the right price. Sarah went quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think I understand now. You always were the smart one, I said. I hung up. Then I sat there in my quiet apartment for a long moment. Somewhere in Austin, the company I'd built with my own hands was falling apart, and the man who took credit for it all was scrambling to understand code he never wrote. I unlocked my laptop and opened my calendar. I didn't know when Robert would call, but I knew he would. Genuine. That was the word I kept coming back to. The system I built was real. The documentation I gave Derek was not. And now everyone knew the difference between the two. I was saving myself with a careful smile. The phone had barely stopped buzzing when another notification lit up my screen. I reached for it slowly, already knowing. Robert Hayes read the email name, subject line, immediate. The email was short. 3 sentences. Robert Hayes wanted to talk. Today. Urgent. I read it twice and set my phone down on the kitchen counter. I let it sit there for 10 full minutes, long enough for him to feel the silence on his end. Then I picked it up and called back. He answered on the first ring. Maya, he said. His voice was tight. Thank you for calling. Robert. I kept my tone even. I saw your email. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, he said. We're in trouble. I waited. You know the system has been having issues, he said. I'm sure you've heard. I've heard clients are unhappy. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. It's worse than that, he said. The client database crashed on Tuesday. Derek tried a hot fix around 3 in the afternoon. I don't know what he did, but the entire billing module went down for 6 hours. We lost a contract worth $400,000 because of it. I didn't respond. Maya, I need you to understand something, he said. I didn't call you to make small talk. I called because I need your help. Robert, I said slowly, I built that system over 5 years. I know every line of code in it. I know the database schema like the back of my hand. And I know why the new hires can't figure it out. Silence. The documentation, he said. Is there something wrong with it? Derek told me he trusted me, I said. He didn't read a single page. Another pause. Longer this time. Maya, he said. What does that mean? It means I wrote documentation that looks complete but doesn't connect to the code base, I said. Variable names that don't match, logic trees that don't flow. It's thorough, Robert. It's just not useful. I let that sit. You're telling me you sabotaged your own handover. I'm telling you that I protected my work, I said. The system I built belongs to me, not to Derek. And I was done watching him take credit for it. He was quiet for a long moment. I heard a door close on his end. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "I understand," he said. "I understand why you did it." "You?" "Maya, Derek told me you weren't a team player. He told me you lacked strategic vision. I believed him. That was my mistake." He took a breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for that. I'm asking if you're willing to come back and fix this." I let the question hang for a moment. Then I answered. "I'm willing to come back," I said, "but not on your terms. On mine. Whatever you need." "Not whatever," I said. "Specific things. Written down." I heard him tap something on his desk, maybe a pen, maybe a keyboard. Name them. "I want $180 an hour," I said. "That's triple my effective rate, paid weekly by wire transfer." Line. "I want a $50,000 bonus when the system is stable. That's non-negotiable." "Mm-mm. And I want it in writing," I said. "A contractor agreement. Signed before I set foot in the building." "It'll be drafted this afternoon." "One more thing." "Anything." "The contract needs to specify that I will not train Derek," I said. "I won't explain code to him. I won't answer his questions. I won't share my notes with him or his team. He doesn't touch the work I do." There was a long pause. "Maya," Robert said slowly, "that's going to be hard. He's the VP of engineering." "I understand completely," I said. "Those are my terms. Take them or leave them." I heard him exhale. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue. But when he spoke again, there was no fight left in his voice. "Fine," he said. "I'll have Linda draft it today. You'll have it tomorrow morning." I gave Robert a list. I wrote in my notes later that night. "You can start as early as Monday." "Monday works," I said. "I'll need login credentials and a clean desk." "You'll have both." "And Derek," I said, "I want him in the meeting when we discuss the terms. I want him to hear every detail." Robert didn't ask why. I thought maybe he knew. The contract arrived Thursday afternoon. 4 pages long. I read every line. The rate was there. The bonus was there. And there, buried in Section 6, was the clause I cared about most. The independent contractor will not be required to provide training, guidance, or code review for Derek Thompson or any member of his engineering team. I signed my name and scanned it back to Linda. Then I clicked send on an email to Robert. "Monday," it read. 9 a.m. sharp. As I closed my laptop, I thought about the look on Derek's face. The moment he realized I had set the terms. The moment he understood that everything I was about to fix was the thing he claimed he built. He'd be in that meeting, sitting in his chair, listening to me dictate a contract he couldn't touch. I smiled and turned off the light. Monday was coming. I was ready. I arrived at BrightPath at 84-7 on Monday, April 15th. Early enough to make a point, late enough to avoid small talk. The glass doors slid open and I walked past the ping-pong table. Still unused. Still sad. The open-plan floor looked different now. 3 new desks had appeared in my old corner. 2 of them were empty. The third had a kid named Marcus who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I didn't stop to chat. I went straight to the conference room where Robert was waiting. He looked older than I remembered, the kind of tired that comes from 3 weeks of watching things break. "Maya," he said, standing up, "thank you for coming." I'm billing from the moment I walked in, I said. 9 a.m. That's 5 minutes from now. I'll start then. He nodded. Fair enough. Derek was already sitting at the table. He had a notebook open, a pen in his hand, like he was ready to take notes on something he'd never understand. Good to see you, Maya, he said, his voice smooth as ever. We're really grateful for the help. I looked at him for a long moment. Derek! That was all I gave him. One word. His name. Not even a lie about being glad to see him. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building for years. The real documentation, not the pretty, useless folder he had on his desk. The one with actual answers. By 9:15, I had the root cause identified. By 10,030, I had the first patch queued for deployment. By noon, I had restored the billing module that he'd crashed with his hot fix. The module he'd broken on a Tuesday afternoon. The one that cost the company a $400,000 contract. His signature was all over that incident report. I read it that morning. Derek hovered near the conference room door for the first 2 days. He'd peek in, clear his throat, wait for me to acknowledge him. I never did. The contract was clear. Section 6. I was not required to provide training, guidance, or code review for Derek Thompson or any member of his engineering team. So when he asked me on Tuesday afternoon, hey, can you walk me through the new deployment process? I looked at him and said 3 words. Read the contract. His face went red. Maya, we're on the same team here. No, I said, you're an employee of BrightPath. I'm a contractor. Those are different teams. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Walked away. On Wednesday, the new hire started sending me emails. Direct messages. Pleading ones. They had questions about the system. They needed context. They couldn't make sense of the code because the comments were gone. I'd noticed Derek had deleted them. A year's worth of my annotations, scrubbed like they'd never existed. I answered every single email from the juniors. I republished the missing documentation to the internal wiki. I even scheduled lunch with Marcus to walk him through the authentication flow. Just not with Derek. On day 3, I logged into the shared drive and saw my old comments restored. Someone had put them back, probably one of the juniors. Probably Sarah. That made me smile. By the end of week 1, the system was stable. By day 9, the client complaints had stopped. By day 12, the uptime report was back to 99.9%. Robert called me into his office on Thursday, April 25th. He closed the door. He didn't sit down. Maya, he said, I need to ask you something. I waited. The documentation you left when you resigned, he said. It was, not usable. I know. He studied me. And this documentation, he said, gesturing at my laptop. This is usable. No. He let out a long breath. I should have paid more attention. To what Derek was doing, I mean. I didn't argue with him. On Friday, April 26th, I submitted my final report. The system was fixed. The bonus was already in my account. $50,000. Transferred that morning. I packed up my laptop. Robert walked me to the door. I don't know how to properly thank you, he said. You already did, I said. The contract was clear. He laughed, a short, tired laugh. I handled it. May 24th, I moved him out of engineering. I didn't ask for details. Don't worry. I heard enough from Sarah later. She told me that Derek tried to argue, said it wasn't fair, said he'd been running the department for years. Robert had one question for him. Name one thing you actually built, Derek. Derek couldn't answer. Sarah said the silence lasted almost 30 seconds. A full half-minute, nobody in the room moved. Derek just stood there, opening his mouth like a fish on a dock. And Robert dismissed him. I was weeks gone by then. I wasn't there for that. But Sarah's text when it happened was short and sweet. A screenshot of the org chart with Derek's name scrubbed off. As I packed up my laptop that last Friday, Derek walked past my desk. His face was red. His tie was crooked. He looked like a man who'd just watched the building he'd been standing in turn out to be cardboard. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. He knew he was done. I still drove past the old building sometimes. Not out of nostalgia, out of confirmation. The parking lot was fuller than it had been in years. Bright Path was thriving, and I had nothing to do with their daily operations anymore. But that first month after I left, the phone didn't stop ringing. Word travels fast in tech, faster than a bad deployment. I got a call from a startup in Dallas that needed a database architect. Then a fintech company in San Francisco. Then a hospital network in Houston that had heard my name from someone who knew someone. I didn't chase any of them. They came to me. I set up my consulting firm in June 2024. Small office on South Congress. A desk, a laptop, a coffee maker that actually worked. I named it Chen Systems. Nothing fancy, just my name and my reputation. The first 6 weeks were a blur. I billed $700 a day and felt guilty. Then I realized that was the market rate for someone who could actually fix things. So I stopped feeling guilty and started charging what I was worth. I didn't go looking for Derek's downfall. It found me. Sarah called me in July with the details. She said a venture capital firm had passed on funding a project Derek was leading. The lead partner had asked one question. Isn't that the guy who lost BrightPath $400,000 because he couldn't read his own architect's code? The deal died right there. Another company rescinded an offer after doing a reference check. Someone from BrightPath had mentioned, off the record, that Derek's technical skills were heritage level, by which they meant he was a relic. A suit who had never written a line of production code in his life. By September, Derek's LinkedIn still said he was VP of Engineering, but everyone knew it was a title without a company. He was doing consulting gigs for small firms, the kind that didn't do their homework. It was sad, actually, watching a man who had spent years taking credit watch his own name become a cautionary tale. I didn't feel good about it. I just felt accurate. The best part came in October. Robert Hayes called me directly. BrightPath had a new initiative, a customer portal that needed rebuilding. He asked if my firm would take it on. Annual contract, $500,000. By then I had a team of 6, a proper office, and a project manager who scheduled my calendar so I didn't have to. I said yes, on my terms. The contract was clean. No exclusivity, no non-compete, no path for anyone at BrightPath to touch my work without my team being paid for it. Robert signed it without a fuss. He had learned his lesson about trying to get something for nothing. Sarah left BrightPath that winter. She came to work for me. She ran my integration practice, which meant she was the one who made sure new clients actually got what they paid for. She told me later that the day she resigned, Derek had tried to reach out. Wanted to grab coffee, wanted to stay connected. She never replied. Some calls don't deserve callbacks. I think about what I learned sometimes, not about code. Code was always easy. It's the people part that's hard. Derek didn't fail because he was stupid. He failed because he thought the game was about appearing competent. He kept papering over the cracks. He never built anything solid. I built things. I kept receipts. I documented my work until there was no way to gaslight me out of the picture. And when I finally did stop smiling and walk away, the world got to see who had really been holding the building up. I don't regret the documentation trap. That's a strange thing to say out loud, but it's true. I didn't break anything. I didn't steal anything. I just refused to be the invisible engine anymore. I took my knowledge with me and let the people who hadn't appreciated it feel its absence. The system went down. They called me. I came back at triple the rate. And then I left again, this time with a contract that made sure they'd have to keep paying for my expertise for years to come. There's a lesson in all of this. If you're the one doing the work, write it down. Save the emails. Keep the versions. Build your case before you need it. Then, when they try to erase you, you don't have to shout. You just open your laptop and let the evidence speak. Thanks for listening. If this story ever sounds like someone you know, share it and make sure the right people hear it. And subscribe for more.